What's up, everyone? Coach Ian Lane here. It is 2:02 a.m. on Saturday night or Sunday morning, however you prefer to think of it. Today, my team had their first league game and lost 4-2, conceding 3 goals from corner kicks. And while obviously that's a super frustrating way to lose a game, especially at U10, it's hard to hold it against the players because we've spent exactly 0 training sessions working on defending corners and 0 minutes in training working on defending corners. So I thought this would be a good topic for my next post, as sort of a way to go through the process of taking a scenario from the game and trying to engineer a solution in training. Obviously, something like set pieces, it's a little bit easier to isolate that sequence of play and isolate certain variables within it. But nonetheless, I still think it's a pretty valuable process to document. Hopefully, as you guys know, I'm a big fan of having sort of a vision in your head of how you want your team to play in games and using training to reverse engineer that. So I'll be taking you guys through the process of coming up with training sessions to engineer a solution to defending corners. So like I said, the way I approach coaching, the way I approach my training sessions is by trying to reverse engineer outcomes that I want to see in games. So I'll start you guys off with what I don't want to see in games. I'll show you guys some of the corners that went wrong over the weekend. So since we hadn't worked on defending corners at all, I was trying to organize everyone last minute and try and get guys into decent positions. But there's no one there to meet the ball in the corner of the 6, and number 1 has 2 shots before we were able to clear the ball. So on the second corner, I made sure to put someone on the corner of the 6-yard box. So of course it goes over his head, and again, the opposing team is able to get a couple shots off, and we're unable to clear the ball. On this corner, we didn't concede a goal, but a lot of the problems are still pretty evident here. The ball comes in, we don't clear it at the corner of the 6, sort of a mad scramble in the box for a little bit, and when we do clear it, notice that it goes to the top of the 18, the top of the box, and then finally we're able to clear it. Really frustrating to lose a game because you concede 3 goals from corner kicks, but you can't hold the players accountable for something you haven't worked on in training. So to go a little bit deeper into that, why haven't we worked on defending corners in training if it turned out to have such a huge impact on our first league game? I'll start with more of a philosophical standpoint, more of an individual standpoint. I think in a game, I think during the course of a season, I think during the course of a player's career, you can have the biggest impact, and the biggest determining factor in matches is what happens during open play. Set pieces are definitely an important part of winning and losing games, but again, taking a step back and looking long term, you really should be focusing on what's happening in open play. Also, a couple more practical things. We had this team starting in the spring, U8s and U9s, and we had sort of a rotation policy for games, so we weren't even fielding a consistent 12 or 13 player roster, let alone a consistent starting 8. So if we would have tried to work on some sort of defensive scheme for corners during training, it might not have translated consistently into games. And again, only working 2 days a week for a 3-month spring season, attacking and defending corners were not a very high priority. I don't think that was going to have the biggest long-term impact with the players. Things like what to do when our team has the ball, what to do when we don't have the ball, so attacking and defending, and then working on those transitions. To me, those are of higher importance. Another reason we haven't spent much time working on defending corners with this team is because I think you need less training sessions. I think you need less time. I think you need to spend less time at practice working on defending corners than you need to work on more of the big picture stuff, building out of the back, attacking patterns, what to do when you lose the ball. I think that takes much longer. That's a much slower process. That's a much more gradual process to implement that effectively in games than it will be for me to teach my teams how to effectively defend from corners. Especially with a corner kick, with a lot of other set pieces, there's a lot more variables that you're certain of. There's a lot more things you can control, and scenarios are a lot more repeatable than what's happening in training. So I think it'll take me less time to implement that effectively. Also, since we weren't playing games over the summer, there was no point in taking the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 training sessions it would have taken to teach them how to defend corners when they weren't going to have to do that on the weekends. They weren't going to get that experience. Now that we've started our league games, though, and we're playing every weekend, sometimes twice a weekend, that's going to take on a greater role for our training. All right, so what's my vision? How do I see my team defending corners in games? When defending corners, I have a very safety-first approach. So Jose Mourinho, for example, at Real Madrid, would orchestrate these insane counterattacks when his team was defending a corner. That's not something I'm looking to do with my teams because I think it's very difficult to be proactive in that type of scenario, in leaving yourself either exposed by leaving some attackers higher up the field, and also trying to corral, trying to control a corner kick, trying to disrupt a team's routine while simultaneously trying to develop your own attack. I think that's a very, very difficult proposition. And I mean, all the more props to Mourinho for getting his team to do that consistently, but that's not something I think my teams will have success with consistently. So to go into a few more of the details of being safety first, so I'm looking for my teams to try and clear it, and not just clear it anywhere, but I'd prefer that they would clear it back to the same side the ball came from. So if a cross is coming in, if a corner kick's coming in from our defensive right side and the attacking team's left-hand side, I'd prefer they try and clear it back out to that same side. The reason for that is I think it's going to be easier to use the momentum of the ball to send it back that way. It'll be a harder clearance. And not only that, but it's a shorter distance for the ball to have to travel to go out of bounds. So ideally, my teams would clear it one touch, maybe towards about the halfway line, as far up the field as we can get it. That'll slow the game down, allow us to push everyone up, get them back in their normal positions, and then from there we can press the opposition. We can try and win the ball back much, much further away from goal. So to get a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of my vision, zonal marking or man marking, obviously is always a big debate that's going on with defending set pieces. For me, ideally, I'd like to defend with a mix of the two, heavily weighted towards zonal marking though. The reason I usually prefer zonal marking is it's sort of a variable you can teach, it's a variable you can control consistently. If you just set your team out to chase the other guys around in the box every game, it's going to be a different look for them every game, different things will happen every game. And not only that, but unless your team is on average quite a bit taller than the opposition, trying to ask your players to win 1v1 aerial battles, I think is a risky way to go about it. With zonal marking, you can control the way your team is set up, and you can make sure your dangerous areas are taken care of. So I guess the ratio I usually prefer ideally is something like maybe your goalkeeper plus 7 players or so playing zonally, and then 3 players man marking. So even my man markers, I usually prefer them to be the shortest players. The reason for that is I want my tallest players in the most dangerous zones. So to look at Barcelona for sort of an example, Piqué is their biggest, baddest guy, probably in aerial duels. So rather than have him chase around the other team's center forward or the other team's center back, the other team's most dangerous player, they usually put him in a zone where he can win the most headers. They usually put him in the most dangerous zone. So again, using zonal marking, you can control things like that. You can make sure that the most dangerous zones are covered by your biggest guys that are going to win the most aerial battles, rather than having them reactively chase around the other team's first or second or third or fourth tallest player. Especially against teams that have multiple threats in the air, I think it's better to cover the dangerous zones with your biggest guys rather than chase them around. And again, the reason I prefer using my shortest players is for man marking is I don't think that their job is necessarily to win that 1v1 battle against the biggest guy. It's more to disrupt them. So if they're marking them, tugging their jersey, even just bothering them already, even if they're 5 foot tall, they're already contributing to defending that corner. They've already had an impact. So to get even more specific with this U10 team, I'll probably rely on an exclusively zonal system because at this age, I don't think teams are delivering corner kicks, delivering set pieces with enough quality consistently that they'll be using set routines. So they won't be trying to find the guy making the back post run and hitting him very consistently. So trying to man mark that guy, I don't think will lead to a very big impact in games. Even the clips that I showed you guys earlier, both those goals came from sort of scrambles in the box. So covering the dangerous areas in on a corner kick, covering the corner of the 6, making sure the posts are covered, covering those zones where those potential scrambles might occur with my better players and with more players, so congesting that zone. I think that's going to lead to more of an impact in games for my team than trying to man mark the other team's tallest, biggest aerial threat. So when taking that vision that I just described and trying to reverse engineer that in training, the starting point I found was teaching the team how to properly clear a corner. So it's sort of funny with a team this young, a lot of your focus in the early sessions is trying to not get them to just boot the ball, trying to get them to pass and receive properly and making that instinctive. So when you go from that being the heavy focus of every single training session to try and teach them how to clear the ball, teach them how to boot it as far as they can, I think it's a delicate process. And the way I sort of handle it is by trying to provide them with the proper context. So clearing the ball like this is not something we want to do all the time. This is how we defend a corner, and this is how we clear a corner kick. So making that context very, very specific. So I'll show you guys a video of a training exercise I've been working on to teach exactly that.
We're going to work on some fitness stuff, and we're going to work on defending corners. Okay? So let me get Zach over here on the red cone. Okay? We're going to have 2 stations going at once. You guys, eyes over here. Coach John will be running a station, and I'll be running a station. Okay? So I'll have the ball right here, and I'll toss you a ball, or I'll kick it to you, and you need to clear it. Okay? On corners, that's one of the very few times in a game when I want you guys to just boot it as far away from the goal as you can. Okay? So we're going to be aiming for the flag with the blue cone. Okay? So Zach, Ben, what are you doing? Okay, right. Okay? So Zach's going to be aiming over there. So where do you think his body should be facing? That way. Okay? So if Zach's right here, and he tries to clear it, he's going to boot it right back to whoever took the corner. Okay? If he faces with his body open, he can still see where the corner's coming from, but however he hits it, if it's with his knee or his foot or his head, where's it going to go? That way. Okay? So I want you guys to try and aim it out of bounds if you can. Kick it that far away. Because if it goes out of bounds, everything slows down, and then we can all push up together as a team. Exactly. Okay? So, before the ball even comes in, you guys should have good body shape. You should be checking your shoulders. So Zach, check your shoulder really quick. Okay? And you should be bouncing on your toes. That way you're ready to move anywhere. Okay? Hey, not hopping up and down like a bunny. Just right here. Okay? And if you can, you want to clear it with the inside of your foot. So you just kind of lean back with the inside of your foot towards the flag. And then what happens in a game after we clear it? Push up. Okay? So after you clear it, full sprint to the next red cone. Okay? And then jog, pick up your ball, and go to the other side. Okay? Make sense? So let's see if Zach can demonstrate it. Okay? So bouncing on his toes, checking his shoulders. Now what? Good. So hey, I want you guys to notice this. First, Zach stopped, and then he jogged. What's he supposed to do? As soon as he clears it, he's supposed to sprint. Okay? So sprint to the red cone. Show me that right now. That's the fitness right there. Hey, now, no, all the way through it. Now it's just jogging. Now you're jogging. You'll grab your ball, Zach. So grab your ball and then go to the other line. Okay? Goalie. Very good question, Luke. So step up to the red cone. So Ben, this is for you also. So you guys, same thing. Your body shape should be kind of open like that. Okay? You should also be bouncing on your toes. And you should also be checking your shoulders. Okay? But instead of kicking it away, what do you think I want you to do? Keeper! Punch it. Okay? No, so stay here. So where do you want to aim your punch? Same spot. Okay? So what I want you to try is your hands. So make it full straight. Right.
Zach, Anthony, Gio,
Okay? And then you'll yell, push up.
Connor Mason,
Okay? Cody. Me. You guys stay back. Ball down. Stand right there.
So to add in a couple quick contextual details with that exercise, the field we use for training isn't lined off like a game field. So we usually use white cones to section it off and designate it as either like the attacking half or the defensive half, depending on what we're working on in training. So the flags you see sort of towards the right corner of the video, that's what we've been using for a goal. And that day we were working on attacking towards goal. So when we set them up, when I set the cones up, when I set the flags up for them to aim towards, they were going to be aiming away from goal. So I think giving them that context is super important. Not just that, but we had two stations going at once. So they were clearing corners coming in from the right and coming in from the left. Since in this type of scenario, players will usually want to use their strong foot, I think giving them that context and making them work both sides, clearing from both sides, is an important little detail. So also, you've probably heard me mention at the beginning of the video that this was fitness for us as well. So clearing the corner and then sprinting up 10, 12 yards or so and then jogging after that, to me is what Raymond Verheyen, the Dutch fitness coach who's very active on Twitter, you guys should definitely check him out, refers to as a football action. So he describes soccer fitness not being described in terms like aerobic or anaerobic or how many sprints you make in a game or how much distance you cover, but it's about the number of football actions you can perform with high quality. So rather than having the players run suicides or run laps around the field or do push-ups or anything like that, I try and give them something that I would call a football action. So clearing a corner and then sprinting up, that's a football action. That involves fitness. So little exercises like this where you can teach a very specific technique that will directly translate into the game, along with a very specific piece of fitness that will directly translate into the game. These are the types of exercise I find very, very valuable, especially at this young age when they still have so much to learn and so much still needs to be put into context for them. They still need to understand what needs to be happening and when, the basics.
There you go. Okay, bouncing on your toes, check your shoulder. Smash it. Now what? Good. Aiden, you're up now. Bouncing on your toes, facing the flag. So turn your body, Aiden. Turn your body that way. There we go. Clear it, clear it. Body shaped off. Now what? Sprint. Now jog. Declan, facing this way, towards the flag. Facing towards the flag. Now clear it. Now what? Sprint, sprint. Keeper. Now jog, now jog. Good. No, you gotta say keeper. Facing the flag. You gotta say keeper.
So here's the first couple reps of the exercise. You can already see the quality is pretty mixed, but hopefully you can also see and sort of understand exactly how this will translate into a game. So one of the earlier clips taken from the game over the weekend, we missed a clearance that was very, very similar to this. And then on the second attempt we had to clear it, we cleared it towards the top of the box. So I think something like this, if the players have good body shape and now that they sort of understand where they're supposed to aim their clearances, right away we're going to start having some direct results with this. Again, because in a situation like defending a corner, there aren't as many variables as there are during open play, and a lot of this stuff will I think, start to click a lot quicker in the players' brains. So this concludes part one of what will probably be a two-part video series on the first couple training sessions I'm using to teach my team, the U10 boys team, how I want them to defend corners. So this first video was sort of to give you guys the context, the vision I have for my team defending corners, and just show the very, very first steps, the very, very foundation of what I think goes into teaching the players this. So what I would really appreciate from you guys is if you could give me some feedback on this video, some of the other ones, maybe leave me a comment on my website, or even better, shoot me a tweet or an email with thoughts on the site, thoughts on the content. Anything positive or negative is really, really appreciated. You can find my contact info under the contact tab on my website, and I would really appreciate any feedback you guys have. Thank you so much for making it all the way through this video.